Hey y'all, welcome back to Horse Range Mountain Farm. If this is your first time here, don't forget to subscribe. While I live, I will praise the Lord. I will sing praises unto my God while I have any being. Psalm 146 verse 2. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about McCulley Farms where we stayed during our Christmas break. And I'm going to tell you about the McCulley Farms first, and then I'm going to tell you about the Wells family second, once we get over to the Wells cabin. Now, the farm was purchased in 1915 by Thomas McCulley, and he bought it from Will Wells along with 40 acres. He and his wife Alice had two sons, Leonard and Dalton. They would go on to have four more: Walton, Luther, Ernest, and Thomas, which was nicknamed Buck. Alice passed away shortly after their sixth son was born. Now, Tom's mother Elizabeth moved in to help with the smaller children, while Tom and the older boys carried on with the daily chores around the farm. Elizabeth was a widow of a Confederate veteran, William Pierce McCulley, and drew a small pension of $10 per month. Tom would go on to marry Mattie Gill. They had one son, Bobby Ray. He died as an infant. Mattie's sister, Rose, had moved in with the family. Rose never married, and between Mattie and Rose, the family was well taken care of. Over the years, Tom had bought up other properties as well as continuing to tend to the old Blue Springs farm. With 6 sons along with sharecroppers and other help, Tom was a successful farmer and community leader. 2 sons, Dalton and Lawton, enlisted in the Army during World War II, and Luther joined the Navy. Ernest served in the Army after the war, and Buck joined the Navy during the Korean War. Leonard, the oldest son's eyesight prevented him from entering the military. Tom died in 1954 and is buried along with his first wife at Antioch Cemetery, not far from the old home site. After leaving the Navy, young son Buck moved back home and continued farming on the old home place. Now, he was the youngest son. He would marry Carolyn Wimpy Williams in June of 1958. Then they had 2 sons, Thomas and Richard. He bought the first tractor for the farm along this time and planted crops including corn, tobacco, rye, and cowpeas. A small herd of cattle began to grow along with a sow pig operation. Some of the old fields were planted in timber, and in 1973, Buck built the first 2 poultry houses and would soon build 2 more. This replaced tobacco as the main crop. Buck also drove a school bus for several years. Tragedy struck in 1978. The oldest son, Thomas, was killed in a hunting accident. Through fate, the family picked up the pieces and carried on. In 1981, Richard married Carol Plain. He had been working with the poultry company his dad had the contract with. There was a need at that time for 2 more pullet houses in the company. Buck agreed to build the 2 houses. That year, Richard came back to work on the farm. He and Carol would go on to have 2 children, Justin and Candace. Poultry and cattle were a good combination on the farm, and soon the plowed fields were replaced with pasture and hay. This combination, along with timber production, continued on through the 1980s and 90s. In 1999, trail riding was introduced to the farm. In 2004, after 30 years of poultry production, 3 of the old barns were converted into horse stalls, 1 into a dining and entertaining hall, and the other 2 are used for hay and other storage. In 2009, Buck, Wimpy, Richard, Carol, Justin, Candace, Leighton, Hunter, Elizabeth, and Kaylin, 4 generations, welcome guests year-round to share the history of the area while enjoying the scenic trails that wind their way down to and along the pristine Withlacoochee River. So now what we're going to do is show you some of the trails and show you a little around the property. And then in a minute, we're going to take a walk over to the Wells cabin and tell you the story behind it. So as we were walking down the trails, we saw all these beautiful live oaks, and they're hanging full of Spanish moss. And I think this is really pretty. My dad thinks that Spanish moss looks kind of eerie, but I thought it was pretty cool. So here's just a quick view of one of the ponds on the property. We also got a little view of this live oak tree right here. It was pretty big, and I thought that's cool looking. Now Nathan and me and the dogs went on a walk over to the Wells cabin. So as we're walking down this trail, we run up on some people on their horses. And then they're all blocking this road. And they're like, you can't go this way. And we're like, really? And they said, yeah, because you'll be going the wrong way. The Wells cabin's that way. And we're like, oh, okay, thanks. And this was actually our family, y'all. It was my dad, Isaac and Jacob, and Mom in the back waving. So this day they had just taken a short ride just because it was so humid and they didn't want it to be so hard on the horses. So I think Jacob was aggravating Nathan like he was going to run him over with the horse. So now we finally made it to the Wells cabin. I'm going to let Nathan tell you a little bit of history and story behind it.
Now to the side of the house here stands the old blacksmith shop, and they've restored it, and it has the tools in it, and they actually use it. They have Civil War reenactments, and they camp all around this place, and they use it to shod their horses with and fix whatever gear they need. This is an old original hand well pump, and it might be one of the original ones for the house here. The Wells cabin was built during the 1870s by Alexander G. Wells. He and his wife Sarah raised 11 children in the little house and made it a home for nearly 50 years. Bradford and Will, second and third oldest sons, built their homes close by and began their families near the old home place. Will and his wife separated. She and their 2 daughters moved back in with her parents. Will's father-in-law, Austin Herring, stated that he would kill Will if he came on his property. On September 5th, 1909, Mr. Herring was sitting on his porch when he saw Will approaching on horseback. He went inside and took his rifle from over the door. As Will rode through the gate, Mr. Herring shot him off his horse. Will is buried in the Wells Cemetery along with one sister, his parents, and 3 of their grandchildren. It is also said that Mr. Herring killed Thomas Layton Morgan. He too is buried in the Wells Cemetery. Last lived in by Woodrow and Lily Mae Waters in 1947 and used for tobacco storage up until 1973 by the property's current owner, T.C. Buck McCulley, the Wells cabin seemed destined to go the way of so many other little pieces of history. Rusty nails, broken glass, an occasional button or buckle are all that's left of the most of the old home places where families poured their blood, sweat, and tears into the land. In one way, the Wells cabin is a testament to one family's struggle, and in another way it represents the struggles of all the pioneers that carved our nation out of the wilderness, the common people that simply wanted to live free in this new land. These are the little pieces of our history that complete the puzzle, but all too often the forgotten pieces that leave the picture incomplete. The Withlacoochee Trail Ride began as a way to preserve and share this area's history, and unique contribution to the great unfinished novel that is the history of America. The Wells cabin served as home to many families from around 1870 until 1947. Without running water and electricity, it was soon considered uninhabitable. Over the years, it stood strong as time marched on and the modern way of life worked its way into society. As with all things man-made, time did begin to take its toll on the structure, and by the early 1990s it became apparent to us that something had to be done soon if the old house was to be saved. This became a reality with the beginning of the Withlacoochee Trail Ride in October 1999. Since then, the old cabin has been visited by hundreds of trail riders, along with many generations of descendants from the families that live there.